Welcome back to Exhibit A List, where pop culture gets cross-examined. I'm your host, Jasmine Weg. I'm a lawyer, and this week we have a packed episode. We're talking about a major below deck Bravo TV show sexual battery lawsuit that just won a huge victory against forced arbitration. Floyd Mayweather suing Showtime for $340 million, claiming they helped his manager steal from him. A wild feud between influencers and a small comedy club that escalated into dueling cease and desist letters, Russell Wilson's name popping up in the Epstein files for the most innocent reason, and the EU ruling that TikTok's addictive design violates their digital services law. Quick reminder before we jump in, you can find me on Instagram at JasmineWeggySQ, and the podcast is at Exhibit A List Pod, and you can find me on TikTok at Jazz the Lawyer. Follow me on all those platforms, reach out, DM, and let me know your thoughts on all the things we're talking about. If you like this episode, the best way to show love is to follow the podcast and leave a rating or review wherever you listen or watch. All right, let's get into it. So, our lead story this week is a massive development in the below deck lawsuit that's part of what people are calling the reality reckoning. Two former crew members from Below Deck Mediterranean, Samantha Suarez and Gray Duddleston, filed a lawsuit against Bravo, NBC Universal, production companies, and cast member Gary King, alleging sexual battery, retaliation, and wrongful termination. Now, that lawsuit was filed back in April 2025, but the big news this week is that a judge ruled that the case cannot be forced into arbitration. And that is a huge deal, and I'm going to explain to you why. Most reality TV contracts have forced arbitration clauses. And those clauses will say that if you have a dispute with the network or producers, you just can't go to court and sue them. You have to go through private arbitration, which means that it will be confidential, there's no jury, and historically, it's heavily favoring the company over the individual. Bethenny Frankel has actually been very outspoken about this. She's been calling for reality TV participants to unionize and fight against these arbitration clauses. She's argued that they're used to silence people and cover up abuse. And here's what gets interesting. In 2021, Congress passed something called Ending Forced Arbitration of Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment Act. Now, that law says that if someone is bringing claims of sexual assault or sexual harassment, they cannot be forced into arbitration. They have the right to go to court. So, in this below deck case, Bravo tried to force the lawsuit into arbitration based on their agreement that there must be an arbitration instead of court. They argued that the crew members all signed contracts agreeing to arbitrate all disputes. But the plaintiff's lawyers, Brian Friedman, now, you guys know why we know that name. He's part of the It Ends With Us lawsuits. He's representing Justin Baldoni and also Mark Garagos, who are these same lawyers also representing Bethenny Frankel in her push for reality TV forum, argued that because the claims include sexual battery and harassment, the 2021 law applies and this case has to stay in court. And the judge agreed. On February 4th, the judge ruled that the plaintiff's sexual battery and hostile work environment claims can proceed in court. The judge did say some of the other claims, like breach of contract and wrongful termination, might still be subject to arbitration, but the core sexual misconduct allegations will be heard by a jury. Brian Friedman said, "This is a landmark ruling for Samantha and Gray and the reality community. The court has made clear that sexual misconduct allegations cannot be swept under the rug through forced arbitration clauses." So, what are the actual allegations? According to the lawsuit, Gary King, who is a cast member on Below Deck Med and appears on camera, engaged in sexual battery and harassment of both plaintiffs while they were working on the show. The lawsuit also alleges that when Suarez and Duddleston complained to the producers, they were retaliated against and ultimately they were fired. The lawsuit claims that Bravo and the production companies knew about Gary's behavior and not only failed to stop it, but actually encouraged it because it made for good TV. The plaintiffs say that Gary's flirtatious and sexually aggressive behavior toward female crew members was a storyline that producers wanted to capture on camera. There are also allegations that producers pressured crew members to drink alcohol before filming and encourage sexual interactions for content. The lawsuit points to a pattern of Bravo protecting male talent while dismissing complaints from women. The case cites other Bravo lawsuits, including Leah McSweeney's lawsuit against Bravo and Andy Cohen, and also Caroline Manzo from Real Housewives of New Jersey and her lawsuit against Bravo over alleged sexual assault by Brandi Glanville during a Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip filming. Bravo has said that the allegations are categorically false and that they take workplace safety very seriously. Gary King has also denied all wrongdoing. The next hearing in the case is set for April 28th, where the judge will hear arguments on jurisdictional issues, including whether California or New York is the proper venue for the case. But the big takeaway here is really that this ruling sets a precedent. Reality TV participants who have sexual misconduct claims can no longer be silenced through forced arbitration. They have the right to go to court, to have their claims heard publicly, and to have a jury decide. And I think we're going to see more of this. Bethenny Frankel has been saying for over a year now that there's a reckoning coming in reality TV. She's been pushing for cast members to be classified as employees rather than independent contractors, which would give them protections under labor laws. The same thing has been happening with members of the Love is Blind cast from past seasons suing and bringing NLRB actions. They've all been advocating for unionization. The reality TV industry has operated for years with very few regulations. Cast members sign these contracts that give networks and producers almost total control. They can film you for hours, edit the footage however they want, portray you as a villain, and if you complain, you are in breach of a contract and can be sued. But laws like this 2021 Anti-Arbitration Act are starting to change that. Cases like this below deck lawsuit are showing that courts are willing to side with cast members when there are serious allegations of misconduct. So we'll see where this case goes, but I think this is just the beginning of a broader shift on how reality TV operates. I will keep you posted. All right, our next story, we have Floyd Mayweather suing Showtime for $340 million, claiming that they helped his former manager, Al Heyman, misappropriate funds. Mayweather made over $1.2 billion during his boxing career. He's one of the highest paid athletes of all time. But according to the lawsuit, $340 million of that money is missing. And here's the background. Mayweather had a deal with Showtime where they would pay him guaranteed purses for his fights. The money was supposed to go through his company, Mayweather Promotions. But this lawsuit is alleging that Showtime and Al Heyman, who was Mayweather's manager and also had business relationships with Showtime, were diverting funds. The lawsuit claims breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and conspiracy. Mayweather's legal team is arguing that Heyman used his dual role as both Mayweather's manager and as someone with financial ties to Showtime to siphon money away from Mayweather. And here's where it gets wild. When Mayweather's lawyer asked Showtime to produce financial records to show where the money went, Showtime claimed that those records were lost in a flood. That sounds sketchy. And no, I'm not kidding. They said there was a flood and the records are just poof, gone. Mayweather's lawyers are calling this suspicious and arguing that it suggests Showtime is trying to cover something up. The lawsuit also suggested that Mayweather is still owed money from his 2015 fight against Andre Berto. That fight reportedly generated tens of millions of dollars in revenue, but Mayweather claims that he still owed at least $20 million from it. Showtime has denied the allegations and said that they fully compensated Mayweather under their agreements. They argue that Mayweather's dispute is really with Al Heyman, not with Showtime, and that Mayweather is trying to drag them into a situation where they didn't do anything wrong. Al Heyman, of course, has also denied all wrongdoing and said that all payments to Mayweather were properly accounted for. So now we're left wondering, who is telling the truth? Well, of course, that's what discovery in a case is for. Mayweather's legal team is going to subpoena financial records, depose witnesses, and try to trace where that money went. If Showtime really can't produce records because of a flood, that's going to be a problem for them. Courts don't look kindly on parties who claim that they lost evidence, especially when it seems way too convenient for them. There's also the question of whether Mayweather has a case against Showtime specifically, or if it's true that really his dispute is only with Al Heyman. If Showtime paid the money they were contractually obligated to pay, and Al Heyman alone was the one who misappropriated it, then Showtime might not be able to be held liable and they might get the case dismissed against them. But if Showtime knew or should have known that Heyman was misappropriating funds and they participated in it or they looked the other way, then Mayweather might have a claim for conspiracy or aiding and abetting. This lawsuit is still in early ages, so we have to wait and see how it's going to develop. But $340 million is a staggering amount of money. And if even a portion of that was misappropriated, that's a massive scandal. One thing I will say, this case is a good reminder that even if you're making hundreds of millions of dollars, you need to have people you trust watching your finances. Athletes, actors, musicians, they're often so focused on their craft that they delegate financial management to others. And unfortunately, there are a lot of stories of managers, agents, and financial advisors stealing from their clients. Mayweather is obviously sophisticated enough to have good lawyers and to bring this lawsuit, but the fact that it allegedly went on for years and involved hundreds of millions of dollars shows how easy it is for this kind of thing to happen, even to someone as savvy as Floyd Mayweather appears to be. All right, moving on. This next story is a little lighter, but it's also kind of fascinating from a legal perspective. The Kalogeras Sisters, who are Canadian influencers with over 50 million combined followers across social media, went to an open mic night at the Hollywood Comedy Club in Los Angeles on January 21st. They filmed their experience and posted a video titled Kalogeras Sisters Do Open Mic Stand-Up Comedy Gone Wrong in their YouTube channel, which has 7.4 million subscribers. In the video, the sisters said that the staff at the club was rude, they had a terrible experience. One sister said, "I wouldn't wish this comedy club on my worst enemy." That video, of course, you can guess it, it went viral. Within hours, the club was flooded with one-star reviews on Yelp and Google. The club owner, Jeon Young Summers, who is an Asian woman, I'm sorry if I mispronounced her name, the host that night, Barry Montoya, who is a Japanese American, started receiving death threats. This is terrible. Racist messages, sexist comments. Summers said the harassment got so bad that she feared for her safety and the safety of her staff and her other comedians who perform at the club. So Summers sent the sisters a cease and desist letter demanding they take down the video, delete all social media posts about the club, and issue a public apology. The letter accused the sisters of inciting a coordinated harassment campaign against the club. Now, the sisters responded with their own cease and desist letter. They denied all of Summers' allegations and said they were treated rudely by the staff, that their video merely displayed how they were treated, and that they've also received death threats as a result of Summers' posts about them. So it's like a feud between the cease and desist letters. It's like my cease and desist letter's coming after your cease and desist letter. Now, the sisters' letter demanded that Summers stop posting about them and issue a public apology. So now both sides are threatening legal action. Here's the thing. From a legal perspective, this is a really interesting case about the power that influencers have and the consequences of online criticism. The Kalogeras sisters have 50 million followers. So when they posted that video, their fans rallied to defend them. The fans review bombed the club, sent threatening messages, and tried to destroy the club's reputation. Cancel culture, anyone? Did the sisters explicitly tell their fans to do that? No. But they did have some responsibility for it happening. The club is arguing that the sisters knew or should have known that if they post a negative video about a small business to their millions of followers, it's going to result in harassment. The club says that the sisters have a duty to be responsible with their platform. And the sisters are, of course, arguing, First Amendment, hello, we have a right to share our experience, and that they can't be held responsible for how their fans react. Both sides have a point. The sisters do have a right to talk about their experience. But when you have that large of a platform, there is an argument that you have some responsibility for the foreseeable consequences of what you post. And there's also a factual dispute that we have about what actually happened that night. The club says the sisters were loud, disruptive, interrupted other comedians' sets, and filmed people without their consent. The club says that they gave the sisters special accommodations by letting them perform, even though they didn't follow the normal open mic protocols. Now, the sisters, on the other hand, they say they were mistreated by staff, that the club is now trying to capitalize on the controversy by including donation links in posts about the dispute. And obviously, at this point, I don't know who's telling the truth. But I do think that this case highlights a broader issue about influencers and small businesses. When someone with tens of millions of followers has a bad experience at a restaurant or a store or a comedy club and they post about it, the impact can be devastating for that business. Review bombing is a real problem. Platforms like Yelp and Google try to filter out fake reviews, but it's hard to catch them all. And even if the reviews eventually get removed, the damage is often already done. So, from a legal perspective, the sisters probably haven't done anything that rises to the level of a defamation or intentional infliction of emotional distress. They shared their subjective experience and they didn't necessarily make false statements of fact. And they didn't explicitly tell their fans to go out and harass the club. But the club could potentially argue that the sisters were negligent or reckless and that they caused the harassment by posting the video without thinking about the consequences. That if you have 7 million followers, it is natural that if these people love you, that they're going to get very angry on your behalf and go and do this review bombing and ruin this business. I think this case is going to settle. Neither side really wants to go to court. The sisters don't want to spend money and time on litigation, and the club just wants the harassment to stop. But this overall is a great reminder that if you have a large platform, you have to think about the impact of what you post. And when you're a small business, you have to be prepared for the responsibility that one negative review or video could blow up in ways you never anticipated. I wonder if this would make a small business think twice when they get an opportunity from an influencer, because I know influencers reach out to businesses. Maybe they want to collaborate or barter and get a free night, a free experience to feature it on their platform. It makes you wonder, as a business owner, will it always be worth it? Because if they have a bad experience, that could single-handedly take down your business. And next up, we have a quick update on the Epstein files. The Department of Justice has released another batch of documents on January 30th, and Russell Wilson's name showed up. People immediately started speculating about why an NFL quarterback would be mentioned in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. But Russell Wilson was very quick to explain what happened, and he says it's completely innocent. Back in 2019, a plane broker approached Wilson about buying a Gulfstream G4 private jet. Wilson viewed the plane, took a test flight with his wife, Ciara, and was interested in purchasing it. But he didn't realize the plane belonged to JE. According to the emails that were released, Epstein's pilot, Larry Vysotsky, was in communication with Epstein about the potential sale. Wilson never actually bought the plane, and he says he never met Epstein. He never had any contact with him. And he posted on X, "Nope, absolutely not. Not today, Satan. Some random plane broker tried to sell me a plane. I had no idea whose plane it was and never bought the plane. Never talked to him, never met the man. Thank God." Wilson's publicist confirmed that Wilson never purchased the aircraft, nor was he aware that any aircraft discussed by third parties had any connection to Epstein. So that's the story. Wilson's name is in the files because Epstein's pilot was discussing a potential sale. And now our last story, the EU, the European Commission, issued a preliminary ruling on February 6th, finding that TikTok's addictive design likely violates the EU's Digital Services Act. The Commission specifically called out features like infinite scroll, autoplay, push notifications, and TikTok's highly personalized recommendation algorithm. The ruling says these features are designed to keep users on the app as long as possible, and that TikTok failed to adequately assess how these features could harm users' physical and mental well-being, especially minors and vulnerable adults. According to the preliminary findings, the design features fuel users' urges to keep scrolling and shifts their brain into autopilot mode, which can lead to compulsive behavior and reduce self control. The commission also said that TikTok ignored warning signs of compulsive use, like the amount of time minors spent on the app late at night and how frequently users open the app. TikTok has responded by saying that the commission's findings are categorically false and entirely meritless, and that they'll challenge the findings through every means available. The findings are preliminary, so no fines have been issued yet. TikTok has the right to review the commission's findings and respond in writing. That process could eventually lead to a non-compliance decision, which could come with a fine of up to 6% of TikTok's global annual turnover. The commission said TikTok should disable features like infinite scroll over time and implement mandatory screen time breaks, including after midnight. Now, this ruling ties directly into the social media addiction trial we talked about in episode 17. The plaintiffs in that case are making the exact same arguments that Meta, YouTube, TikTok, and Snapchat deliberately designed platforms so addictive and that the companies knew these features were harmful, especially to kids. TikTok actually settled the California case right before trial, which suggests that they didn't want the jury to hear the evidence. And now the EU is saying that the same things that the plaintiffs in the US lawsuits are saying. The Digital Services Act is a European law that took effect in 2023. It requires large online platforms to assess and mitigate risks to users, including risks from addictive design. That law gives regulators the power to investigate platforms and impose fines for noncompliance. Makes you wonder why the US doesn't have a similar law. The EU has been much more aggressive than the US in regulating tech companies. They fine Meta, Google, Apple, and others billions of dollars for various violations. So if the EU says that TikTok's design is addictive and harmful, TikTok is going to have to make some changes or face massive fines. The question is whether the US will follow suit. The social media addiction trial in California is ongoing, and if the plaintiffs win, it could lead to similar regulations in the US. But right now, the US approach has been much more hands off. There's been talk in Congress about regulating social media, especially when it comes to kids, but nothing has passed yet. I think the EU ruling is significant because it's based on scientific evidence about how these features affect the brain. The commission interviewed experts in behavioral addiction, reviewed extensive research, and analyzed TikTok's own internal data. They're not just speculating. They're actually saying there's concrete evidence that these features are designed to be addictive and that they cause real harm. We're going to see how this one plays out. We're going to follow it. But I think it's part of a broader global reckoning with social media and how these platforms operate. All right, now it is time for petty court. Today's case, your coworker invites you to their open mic comedy night. You go to support them, but they bomb. Like they really bomb. Crickets, awkward silence, the whole 9 yards. The next day at work, they ask you what you thought. What do you say? Guys, here are the options. Option A, you tell the truth. Honestly, it wasn't great. You tell them everyone bombs sometimes. Keep working on it. Option B, you lie. You were amazing. The crowd just didn't get your humor. And option C, you deflect. It was so fun to watch you perform. I could never get up there. Here's my ruling. Go with option C, deflect. And here's why. Your coworker is vulnerable. They put themselves out there. Comedy is hard. And bombing in front of a crowd is humiliating. Going with the truth, option A, you're not actually being helpful. They already likely know that they bombed because they were there. They felt the silence. You telling them that it was bad isn't giving them new information. It's just a pile on. If you lie, which is option B, they're going to know you're lying. And then they're going to feel even worse because now they're embarrassed and they know you're just trying to make them feel better. But if you deflect, you acknowledge that you were there and you appreciated their effort without giving them a verdict on the quality. You're being supportive without being dishonest. Now, if your coworker presses you and says, no, really, tell me what you actually thought, then you can be honest but kind. Something like, I think the material needs some work, but I admire you for getting up there. Most people would never have the guts. But unless they explicitly ask for real feedback, just be supportive. Comedy is brutal. Let them process the bomb without you adding commentary. This works, I think, in many similar situations. The exception to the rule is if the person is asking you for genuine, constructive feedback because they want to improve. In that case, be honest, but frame it in a helpful way. Like, I think the premise of your jokes is funny, but the timing needs to work. Have you thought about taking a comedy class? But that's a very different conversation than what did you think the day after they bombed? Case closed. All right, that's what I've got for you this week. Zach lawsuit wins big against forced arbitration. Floyd Mayweather is suing Showtime for $340 million. The Kalogeras Sisters are feuding with a comedy club. Russell Wilson's name showed up in the Epstein files. And the EU says TikTok's addictive design violates their law. If you found this breakdown helpful, and you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend who's been following any of these stories or is the little legal eagle in your group. And if you haven't already, please take a second to follow the podcast, leave a rating or review or both wherever you're listening or watching. You can find me on Instagram, JasmineWegESQ or Exhibit A List Pod. And you can find me on TikTok, Jazz the Lawyer. Come tell me what you think about any of these cases. Let me know what you want to hear more about next. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Exhibit A List. Stay curious.